So I'm going to be conscious of time and walk through a demo, but here I'm going to try and give you a picture end to end, right? How should a customer with Druva think about the security of their backups? How should they monitor the security posture of their backups? How should they actually respond? How should they actually recover? So here you can actually see with the Druva Cloud, as soon as you log in your Cloud Console, you have an overview of all of your data across your enterprise. It could be on the edge, it could be in M365, it could be in a data center like Neil mentioned. I'll focus on the security features and touch upon the posture piece, which starts with our security command center, which is really a dashboard providing you a real-time overview of risks in your backup environment. And it's constantly evaluating it around things like access configurations like MFA and so on. So if you do notice like some of those attacks, something has changed, you'll get notified. You have the ability to actually dive in and be able to take corrective action, if you will, right? Again, the world of shared responsibility, right? Similarly, you can lock down access by geofencing. Some of these IPs from a geofencing standpoint might be locked down behind a VPN. Again, it's all about defense in depth and trying to make it as difficult as possible for the attacker, right? So that's the security posture access configuration into backup itself. You could have a bad actor that's compromising security agents in a customer environment. They could be turning off your EDR. They could be turning off your backup agents. We provide a real-time overview into the health of your backup agents so that you can actually make sure that these backup agents are connected, they're working, you have regular backups, and you don't find out during an incident that your backups weren't working 10 days back and you don't have data to go back to, right? Similarly, there are other kinds of risks where, depending on the scale of your environment, you might have a lot of API access keys you've generated for your automation to integrate it into the Druva Cloud. You might have admin credentials. And we give you an overview into the hygiene of these. What do I mean with that? When were they used? How long were they used? Do you have some credentials that are no longer being used so that you can actually recycle them, right? Not only do we do that, we give you much more granular visibility in terms of their usage. We can actually tell you where these have been used from. Are these locations something brand new you've never actually seen before, right? Like this too fast to travel problem that we talk about in the security world, right? Giving you visibility into that rich data in terms of audit trails around what actions did these administrators take, did these API access tokens take, so that you have context, you can accelerate your recovery itself, right? So that's about the security posture of your backup. Now, if you imagine somebody comes in, they still are able to try and get to your backups. You might have legitimate use cases where you're deprovisioning a server. You want to be able to free up some data so that you can back up more data. You could delete those backups if you wanted to. So let's say a bad actor tried to do that. Because of the beauty of being built in the public cloud, we can actually control or stagger those deletions, if you will, right? So you can come into the platform and actually see a centralized delete log across all of your assets, and then choose, investigate, and determine if some of these were inadvertent or malicious in nature. You can actually choose to roll these back. I can't tell you how many examples in customer situations, but customers have been able to leverage these capabilities. Again, you could, this is available via API as well as UI, right? Now, in this case, security is all about optionality, where it's customer choice. They're making trade-offs. If you wanted to lock it down even further, we give you the flexibility to be able to do it through something called data lock, where even an admin with guard rights wouldn't be able to delete backups if they wanted to, if you set data lock on some of these backup sets, where for the duration of this retention period, those backups are not deletable even by the admin. Keep in mind, when you back up data with Druva, it is immutable in the Druva cloud. All of this is stored in an air-gapped environment. No Druva engineer can get access to it. We can't read it. But in case there's a threat vector where you have compromised credentials, we can protect against that as well. And again, all of this is optionality, giving customers different options. There are fail-safes built into the product itself, with things like rollback actions where you can roll deletions back. And at the same time, you can take it to a whole new level by actually locking down backups. But that comes with some trade-offs around flexibility, as you can imagine. Now, the threat actor is moving along the kill chain, right? I'm trying to outline various scenarios. if they are in your environment, they're actually initiating mass changes, mass encryptions. What a lot of customers tell us is they make trade-offs from a security standpoint, where they may or may not have EDR on some of these NAS boxes, let's say, or they might not have visibility there. So here we have a set of capabilities that are complementary to your security environment, where we can baseline your environment based on changes, based on what's considered normal. And then we'll actually alert customers to deviations from those normal in terms of changes. This is what we refer to as data change anomalies, where we can actually tell you, you can see in this timeline what data actually changed. We give you very granular visibility into what files were created, what files were deleted, which ones were encrypted, and so on, down to the granularity where you can actually get file name information and choose to investigate that in your security tools. Again, these capabilities have existed for some time now. Being a SaaS vendor, we're pushing out releases every 2 weeks. In that spirit, we've iterated on these features, improved them based on customer feedback, where you can actually tune the sensitivity of these alerts specific to a customer's unique environment, their data patterns, and so on, right? So once you're actually investigating such anomalies, you can move along in that workflow and actually choose to lock down your backups if you've determined those assets were actually impacted, where you can come in, you can actually investigate some of these assets, try and understand when were their data anomalies, correlate it to what's going on with your security tools, being able to take action and actually quarantine those very powerful quarantine capabilities at a file level, at a snapshot level, across a given time window, and so on, so that you can actually prevent reinfection risks. And here, as you'll see in this pre-recorded demo I'm playing for you, is I'm transitioning into how do you actually do recovery, right? The big problem is really around how do you actually select a recovery point, where we've had threat hunting capabilities for a while now, where you can actually search based on file hashes, based on metadata. Like if you have like a .play ransomware, for example, a file extension, you can search for that across your backups, get a sense of the incident timeline itself, make a determination of the recovery point, and then initiate recovery. So we think about recovery as a curation problem, right? Where how do we make it easier for customers across different types of workloads? And what we've learned is that it's different for different workloads. For something like VMware, it's more of a certification workflow where you want to recover this into a sandbox environment. You want to scan for malware in there. You want to be able to clean up malware. Once you've actually certified it, you want to actually use something like vMotion to be able to move it into production. Or in certain cases, let's say if you're leveraging a file-based workload, we can actually curate this where you just punch in an incident timeline. We'll scale out in the cloud, crawl all those backups in the cloud, and be able to pick and choose files from different snapshot and put together what's essentially called a golden snapshot, if you will, therein avoiding data loss, filtering out malware. Now, you'll notice a lot of bells and whistles in here, and this comes from our experience helping customers. How do we actually accelerate that recovery? You don't care about certain video files. You have the flexibility to actually specify those extensions. Let's say you know you're dealing with a particular type of ransomware strain. You have the ability to actually filter all of those out. So this is how we think about the recovery problem itself. And then you have very, very granular information in terms of how these recovery jobs proceeded, how you were actually able to filter out malware. I think there were some questions earlier around what kind of threat intelligence do we use. A lot of customers are typically surgically looking for a set of IOCs in most ransomware incidents. We give them the flexibility to be able to plug that in, and you can see the status of those restored jobs and be able to filter those out. So here, what I'm essentially showing you is a report, if you will, from one of those recoveries, where you can see a recovery report, you can see these files, which snapshot were they actually picked up from, were they actually filtered out, were they malware, were they encrypted files? What customers have told us is this is hugely helpful for them in terms of certifying that recovery, submitting it to those auditors, if you will, and then being able to get a sign-off on the recovery itself, right? Again, that was a super quick demo I wanted to walk through. And hopefully that gave you a sense of our capabilities here. And I think at the tail end of my presentation, just looking at the time, what I wanted to leave you with is what we hear from customers, right? We made the choice many years ago to build all of data protection for the cloud era in the cloud. And you see on the slide all the great security benefits customers get, right? What I want to leave you with is some of the things we actually hear from customers, why they actually love Druva, the benefits of being built in the cloud, getting that time to value, getting that total cost of ownership. Security is obviously the topic of discussion today. All those benefits in terms of inherent ransomware protection, a defense in depth, being able to scale as you go along, all of this backed with our data resiliency guarantee, right? So ultimately, this is what Druva is about, which is really let us do it for you. You don't have to manage data protection anymore. We will provide all of those capabilities for you in a cloud native manner, in a secure manner, right? So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you. I think there were a few questions there that I'm happy to take and address.
Yes.
Badri? Oh, sorry, Jasper.
Okay.
Go first.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Jasper. I have two questions for you. First of all, you said that the backups are totally secure in the cloud because not even Druva engineers can get to them. Is that correct?
So that's right. So if you look at the underpinning of any multi-tenant SaaS architecture, right, our engineers can access all of this data directly. All of this is accessed only by code, right? And there are security controls in place. We have a number of security certifications that actually attest to that very point around things like FedRAMP, SOC, HIPAA, and so on. And you can see all of these certifications we have on security.druva.com.
Okay, so what happens if the customer is completely wiped, no data left anymore, and they don't know their credentials to access your cloud anymore? How do they get their data?
Again, we have a fairly detailed security white paper that's actually listed on your site that actually talks through all of this. We have a number of fail-safe built in here where we can actually help them recover the data, being able to have break glass credentials. So the number of operational safeguards we actually recommend that customers actually leverage to be able to recover their data.
So, but that sounds like you're depending on them doing these break glass kind of things. If they don't, the data is lost.
That's right. Again, security is all about trade-offs. So there, it's shared responsibility. We give them a number of security controls in place to be able to secure their access, including things like MFA and so on. So the encryption key is unique to each customer. Only the customer has access to it. And again, it's a dual envelope encryption piece where we leverage, where we protect the DEC as well as the customer encryption key. Again, our white paper goes into a lot more detail on this, Jaspers.
Okay, and the second question is it possible to get my data on a hard drive if I need it faster and I only have a thin connection where I can't pull down stuff?
So we do have, we've helped customers recover leveraging things like AWS's Snowball Edge and so on, right? Where we play into that AWS ecosystem and help them get that, if there's a large volume of data, which they either want to back up for the first time or get back, we can leverage those capabilities.
Thank you.
So maybe just a follow-up question on that. That's an interesting part. So how long does it take you to leverage something like that?
Good question. I'm trying to think through what AWS's times are on there. I guess we would really be dependent on AWS there. I think what's key there is really the shipping time for those hard drives. I think AWS has gotten those back down. But again, to kind of oversimplify it, it's AWS essentially plugging in a hard drive into their back and getting all of the data and then shipping it to you, right?
Yeah, that's the known part. That's not what I'm referring to. My question is more around transferring the data from your storage to another storage. The data with you, AWS would be able to go ahead and connect it to a physical drive.
So is your question more about restoring data from AWS back into the customer environment?
So you mentioned Snowball, And you've mentioned that there's an option, which I think is interesting. That was an interesting question. Customers with a significant amount of data that needs to be restored, then they don't have a huge bandwidth to go ahead and start restoring it. So what is a faster option, and how do you leverage that option, as you mentioned, for Snowball?
Again, this is a standard AWS option where customers can actually request a Snowball edge. So we will work with AWS to be able to seed that data that plays into the same services that AWS has with S3 and so on, so that this data is seeded onto that. And when it goes back to a customer environment, they're actually able to leverage the restore capabilities in Druva and be able to restore from a local hard drive as if they were restoring from AWS. Again, it's a fairly intricate piece. Happy to follow up and walk you through that. Not sure if you have time to walk through all of those details right now.
No, just in general, trying to understand, if such process was done before, what's the turnaround time? Just, something very high level.
So typically, from what I recall, it's in the order of a few days for the drive to get to you. In terms of preparing the data, seeding that data, I don't have numbers off the top of my head. So,
can you go back 2 slides? You went through that second to last slide pretty quickly.
And I believe Kirsten had one last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it there.
Yeah, my question was for the last slide. So did I get that right? You will pay $10 million for customers who lose data or get compromised data secured with Druva?
That's right. So we have a number of different SLAs. There's a legal agreement that you can actually read through on our website that goes into this in a lot more detail.